So, Macross 7. We have arrived at the dreaded Macross 7, the double zeta of the Macross franchise. I won't lie, at first it's brutal. Kind of the same weird feeling that happens when you finish Zeta Gundam and move to Double Zeta Gundam. Like, is this really happening? Is this the true canonical continuation of the Macross saga? And well, yes it is. And before I even continue, is this a good series? Conceptually? Yes, definitely. Like with Double Zeta, by the end of the series I was very invested in the plot and even the songs. So yeah, even Planet Dance. Should you skip it and only watch the compilation movie Macross FB7? You may, but I wouldn't recommend it since here is where the Macross universe truly expands and gives us more information on the proto-culture and the Zentradi, and more importantly, we get to see Max and Maria again, both as leadership figures inside the Macross 7 and even as ace pilots on the latter part of the series. But is this an easy series to digest? Well, I can't speak for you, but for me it was hard as it's very repetitive on some parts and I didn't enjoy some of the mechanical design, with a somewhat exception for the Diamond Force Valkyries and the BF-22, but more on that later. You see, Macross 7 is a very interesting series as it introduces some pretty weird concept about an ancient proto-culture mysterious enemy. The power of songs is also justified and developed a little bit better, and best of all, we have the music of Fire Bomber, my personal favorite fictional event of the entire Macross universe. The trouble is that while the concepts are super exciting and novel, the execution not so much. As I said on my previous video, Macross Plus and 7 were being developed at the same time. That meant that things had to be developed differently for each one. In Kawamori's words,
"There are things I could only do because the projects were simultaneous too. I got to test out making a totally polar opposite work because of it. I mean that we took a relatively realistic approach with Plus. On the other hand though, I have doubts about that kind of methodology. Essentially, I wanted to make something the opposite of that, something off-the-wall ridiculous. That's why I was able to take a more manga-like approach with 7.
And this is the true problem of Macross 7, at least for me. The concept of the Proto-Devlin, the Anima Spiridia, even the Sound Force with their weird mecha design, they're all amazing. The handling though, well, let's just say that they never take it seriously. And the worst offender is the fact that the first part of the series is absolutely repetitive, with the Spiridia stealing happening again and again with no real sense of danger. I mean, and well, obviously spoilers ahead, the Proto-Devlin are entities from another universe that inhabited the bodies of ancient proto-culture experimental bioweapons that devour life energy or spiritia. Those entities were imprisoned for centuries but reawakened when the poor souls of the Megaroid 13 found them in a planet in the Varavara system and got their spiritia absorbed. With those bodies now an empty shell, the Proto-Devlin possessed the entire military fleet and are now in search for more Spiridia to be able to restore the original bodies and dominate the entire universe, with humans now serving as their Spiritia farm. And that's Macross 7 new enemy, an alien species more akin to the Cthulhu mythos that's absolutely bonkers and creepy. Archivist Exero even said that once a single Proto-Devlin entity destroyed an entire fleet of Zentradi ships. That's the power level of the Eldritch abominations known as the Proto-Devlin. Oh, but let's not worry, they're only just psychic vampires and Maria City Police can handle them. That's, in my opinion, the whole problem of Macross 7. In a universe where we've seen that an idol was able to stop a war and everything is played absolutely straight and serious, why did 7 drop the ball and dismissed everything as funny and or dumb?
Essentially, I wanted to make something the opposite of that, something off-the-wall ridiculous.
Oh, right. That's why. And seen through that perspective, Kawamori definitely succeeded. Good thing is that the ridiculousness of the story progressively diminishes towards the end. Macro 7 can be more or less divided into 4 arcs. The absolutely boring first part with the vampire attacks, the rise of Sibyl, the fall of Sibyl and Giggle's attempt to bring her back, and the final all-out war against the Gepelnich and the reawakened Proto-Devlin. In reality, it's easier. If Basara barges into the battle with the song Planet Dance, then you're probably still in the boring part. If it's Holy Lonely Night, then you probably reach the interesting parts. As per usual, I'll divide my exploration in various parts, yet in a very much needed change of pace, I'll try and keep it short, since if I lose focus, I'll only concentrate on the bad parts. Macro 7 has a lot of filler content that isn't worth talking about, and almost everything that's important happens toward the end. With that said, I'm Absa, and it's time now to explore how the Macross universe meddled with Eldritch abominations just to be saved by a boy who wanted to make the galaxy sing. I'll start this exploration by shamefully admitting that way back in the early 2000s, the first time that I heard about Macro 7, I thought that it was the 7th sequel of the original Macross. I mean, I kinda knew that Macross and Robotech were different things, but since there was no internet nor any way of knowing about Japanese culture other than anime cons, when I heard about Macro 7, I was like, wow, the franchise has grown a lot. Now, many years later, I still wonder why the creators chose that surname, as it doesn't add up. Super Dimension Fortress Macross is the first one, then comes Do You Remember Love, then Flashback 2012, and even if you count Macross 2 and Plus, Macro 7 would be the 6th animated installment of the franchise, not the 7th, and that's not counting the video games. So why is it called Macro 7? Is there any esoteric or numerological reason for it? I really don't know. Maybe it's just as simple as they threw a couple of dice and that number came up. But if you know or have a theory, by all means leave it in the comments. Anyway, the series introduces a new vessel that's exploring the galaxy, the Macro 7. All with its military base called Battle 7 and the civilian complex aptly called City 7. In charge of the entire vessel is the legendary power couple Max and Miria Genius, with Max as the head of the military and Miria as the mayor of the city. And I got to tell you, this is one of the best parts of Macro 7. Max and Miria are great characters that, even though they don't get enough screen time, you can see that they have evolved from the ace pilots that were to more complex and even strange leaders. Oh, but don't worry, they still keep their pilot instincts super sharp, but I'll talk about Operation Stargazer later. The true main characters are the up-and-coming band Firebomber, comprised by Neki Basara, a brutal character that I love to hate and hated to love, the 7th daughter of Max and Miria, Mylene Flare Genius, the ex-soldier now turned pacifist Ray Locklove, and the ever-silent and mysterious Befiras Fez. Making his triumphant return in full Sanctuary size, we have also Archivist Exedo, who is now Commander Max advisors, and there's also Gambling Kisaki, Miria's best student and now a promising pilot, part of the elite Diamond Force of Battle 7. More or less, those are the characters under which the story revolves around. Well, them and the Proto-Devlin. What's absolutely great about this series is the fact that we have returning characters from the first Space War in leadership positions, and this accomplishes two things. First, a direct continuity is established with the Macro 7 serving as the true sequel to the original, because let's remember that Macross Plus was more like a side-scroll spin-off. And second, it acknowledges the fact that time is moving forward and that the newer generations are fulfilling Global's dream of human colonization and of Centron and Micron coexistence. This is huge given the fact that on Plus, human and Centron coexistence was a little bit hard to conceive with the Isamu and Gald conflict. Here we even have a Centron or Meltron to be more precise on the drums. And as I said in my previous Macros Plus video, by now we already know that the UN Spacey is still developing newer and more advanced Valkyries, so in Macro 7 we are introduced to the Fire Valkyrie of Basara and also the BF-17 Nightmare, a very cool looking chunky Valkyrie that's mostly based on the real life Nighthawk. And to give you a little bit more context, the Nighthawk was revealed to the public more or less at the end of the 80s, and it was a huge deal since it was the first operational aircraft to be designed around stealth technology. Its all black look is super weird and the silhouette is very alien. So yeah, every 90s kid, including me, was fascinated with its design. And I can't say for sure, but the novelty of the design and its fame are probably the reason why Kawamori decided to include a Valkyrie in design similar to it in Macro 7. Until now, everything sounds okay, right? New returning characters, new real-life inspired Valkyries, Eldritch Abominations as the new enemy, and psychic vampires running rampant. Actually, scratch that. Everything sounds very 90s, but the 90s aesthetics are for another video. The trouble begins with the story beats. All through the early stages of the story, every episode is played more or less like this. Basara is being a jerk with Firebomber, the Proto-Devlin with the Barauta army are hunting for Spiritia, Max orders his soldiers to stop them and they can't, Basara hops inside his Fire Valkyrie to try and stop the war by singing, the Diamond Force is deployed and Basara just stands in the way of the military, the BF-11 and the Diamond Force more or less stop the Barauta army but they suffer heavy losses. All meanwhile, Basara is singing Planet Dance. And well, the first couple of times you listen to the song, you're like, wow, this song is great, pure rock and roll awesomeness. But maybe after the 20th time you're like, again with Planet Dance? Come on, Basara, don't be like this. And then something weird happens. After the 50th or so time you listen to it, you start to like it again. I mean, it's no Totsugeki Love Heart or Holy Lonely Night, but it's a really cool song. I can't really say when my fondness for Planet Dance came again throughout the series, but after hating it for many episodes, it returned to being one of my favorites. But I digress. As I was saying, Psychic Vampire stealing Spiritia for Eldritch Abominations, yada yada yada, Basara trying to sing away the war while obstructing military operations, yada yada yada. Finally, Gigil, the Proto-Devlin leader of the shock troops of the Barauta army, has gathered enough energy to awaken Civil, a little Proto-Devlin with immense power who apparently only knew how to say two words: Anima Spiritia. An homage to Do You Remember Love with Ichijo played by Basara and Minmay by Milen. Battle 7 separates from the Macro 7, City 7 gets lost, then gets united, and well, Basara's songs happen to have a miraculous healing ability with all of those who lost their Spiritia. And finally, after discovering that water is wet, the military discovers the power of songs or song energy thanks to Dr. Chiba, and with a very reluctant Basara, Firebomber is now part of the Sound Force, a military-endorsed group of Valkyries that go to the battlefield to sing and stop the war. Yes, as stupid as this sounds, this is true. But then again, this is Macros, so songs do have that kind of power. Obviously, many other things happen, but from here on, things go a little bit faster, a lot less repetitive, and much more interesting. By the latter part of the series, the Sound Force is an active part of every military operation since it has proved its worth. Gambling now accepts Basara as almost a co-worker and the Macro 7 fleet is defending its ground against the Proto-Devlin. The problem is that even though they have been requesting backup, the UN Spacey is gradually disowning the fleet, telling them that they're on their own. And also, by this moment, the whole military is aware of the tremendous power of the Proto-Devlin. Gigil sacrificed himself by forcing his true awakening while battling with his fellow Proto-Devlin Balgo. All this to save Civil, yet the power of the Proto-Devlin is such that an entire planet was engulfed and destroyed by Gigil's true form. Again, That's the power level of this new threat. And until now I haven't spoken much of the obnoxious Neki Basara because, well, he seemed like a very uninteresting main character with a one-track mind. Sing his song to stop the fights. At the start of the series, he gets totally offended when he discovers that his Valkyrie is equipped with missiles. He even complains to Rei that war is stopped with songs, not with firepower. But towards the end of the series, Basara is sick and tired of people not hearing his songs and gets so frustrated and nervous and desperate that, in a very shocking move, he decides to attack the enemy with the missiles. I was really shocked with this scene because this is the reaction that a normal human being would have. Even the high and mighty pacifist Basara got desperate regarding the situation with the Proto-Devlin. And in another super poignant moment, it's Gamblin who stops said missiles with his Valkyrie and reminds Basara that wasn't he supposed to end war without violence? This is an amazing moment that's not on the compilation movie, so you have to watch the series. This moment encapsulates Kawamori's feelings about war and violence because, you see, for Do You Remember Love, he wanted to change the ending so that the final conflict against Botolza was resolved without violence. Yet, the powers that be didn't like this, so the ending was Ichijo barging through the fortress and showering it with bullets. But I truly believe that Kawamori regretted that decision, so for Macro 7 he intended to correct that wrong. And precisely this scene with Gamblin and Basara reinforces that idea. It's also a foreshadowing of how the ending will play out. Gamblin has another great scene where, as the final battle is happening and Basara is in a state of coma, he starts to sing the Accursed Planet Dance to Basara. This is a huge deal because since day one, Gamblin was against Basara's singing and presence as the military asset. Gamblin is the epitome of discipline and military order, and Basara is the complete opposite. So for him to be singing to Basara is the acknowledgement that songs are miraculous in the Macross universe, something powerful that even soldiers are incapable of ignoring or dismissing as stupid. Gamblin surrenders to the power and to the hope of Basara's song, and to the surprise of everyone, Basara recovers. I know I said that I was going to talk about Basara and ended up talking about Gamblin, but for me, seen as a standalone character, Basara doesn't work. He feels too one-dimensional. Yet, his power comes from that same one-dimensionality that, in a way, it's actually a tremendous willpower to do what his heart wants, disregarding everything else, even in the face of danger, and more importantly, inspiring everyone around him. Basara is so tenacious that he seems obstinate and stubborn and even aloof, yet he is truly a genius, and geniuses work differently. After all, he is the anime spirit. Basara works best when he is contrasted with characters such as Gamblin or even Giggle, who have diametrically opposite worldviews, and in the end, they lean towards Basara's ideals because, in a very idealistic world, culture should always triumph over violence. Too bad that in our world it doesn't happen that often. Anyway, Basara man, yeah, I didn't like him at all in the series, but I like what he represents and his tenacity. We can learn a lot from him, both good and bad. Towards the end of the series, things progressively start to get worse to the Macro 7 fleet, to the point of no return when the UN Spacey orders them to launch a preemptive strike to the Proto-Devlin's home world, aka a suicide mission to buy more time. The mission is called Operation Stargazer, and it was a voluntary operation headed by Max. In essence, the mission consisted in stealthily attacking the planet and fire reactionary weaponry in the main base where the Proto-Devlin's body reside. We know, no biggie. The Emerald, Diamond and Sound Force lead the way, but this is the Proto-Devlin's stronghold, so it's a brutal battle where even Gamblin is presumed dead. But from out of nowhere, a blue Valkyrie falls in the middle of the battle and overwhelms everyone with its genius piloting skills. Immediately afterwards, we revealed that the pilot is none other than Commander Maximilian Genius himself. This is one of the best, if not the best scene of the whole Macro 7 saga. Even though Max is in his 50s, he has lost none of his excellent piloting skills, and we can see that everyone, even Vassara and Milene, are beyond amazed. Max gets through everyone and manages to fire the reactionary weapon right in the middle where Gepelnich is, and in a super cruel plot twist that actually made my jaw drop, Gepelnich teleports the bomb to the mothership who was waiting just outside the planet and destroys it. Yes, let that sink in. The main character's only way out of the Proto-Devlin's headquarters just got blown away. This is what I mean when I say that towards the end, Macro 7 more or less gets back its predecessor's serious tone. This was a brutal scene that I definitely did not expect nor saw it coming, even less after witnessing Max's absolute control and dominance of the battlefield. After this, everything seemed lost, yet we learned that Gamblin is not dead but seriously wounded, and he actually manages to save everyone and let them out. But now the entire Macro 7 fleet is in a very tough spot as more and more Proto-Devlins are reawakening. After a couple of more battles, Sivil turns against her fellow Proto-Devlins but is badly injured, so Vassara tries to give her Spiritia by singing. Yet she loses control and almost completely drains him of his Spiritia, with this being the reason why he is in a coma at the start of the final battle, as I said previously. And with Vassara out of the picture, we now learn the true magnitude of Gepelnich's power. I have been equating Proto-Devlins with Eldritch Cthulhic monsters and abominations of insane power, but no Proto-Devlin comes close to Gepelnich, not in appearance, nor in madness. It is a huge monster with many wing-like shapes around its core, where the poor human vessel is still trapped. The trouble is that Sivil tries to stop Gepelnich by releasing a wave of pure Anima Spiritia energy that she got from Vassara, but instead of stopping it, the energy causes a further mutation to the Proto-Devlin's body. Now, having Anima Spiritia inside it begins to grow out of control into the very thing the former Gepelnich feared, a being akin to a Spiritia black hole, always hungry for more energy with countless arms that emerge from itself searching for more and more and more. Design-wise, this version of Gepelnich is absolutely creepy and terrifying, and makes me imagine that maybe in the future, the Macross franchise will indeed tell us a story that goes full eldritch horror, totally unlike Macro 7, which was almost played for laughs. But with this, we arrive at the end. Vassara returns triumphantly to the battlefield in his Fire Valkyrie to do what he does best: sing to his heart's content. And this time, Sivil is with him and she is also singing. Now let's take a step back. Gepelnich is in a frenzied state devouring Spiritia, the Macro 7 military is suffering heavy losses by the second, and here we have a boy singing with all his heart against something that seems like an unmovable mountain. But this time the mountain moved. What could come out as super cliché, a moment super cliché where the power of friendship saved the day, it actually is a very moving scene that was foreshadowed since the very beginning, when Vassara wanted for the warriors to stop fighting and listen to his song. Suddenly, Gepelnich starts to sing, and there, amidst the brutal battle, the monstrous abomination comes to the conclusion that singing was the key for creating Spiritia from the void. Spiritia creation that comes from singing. Who would have guessed? And yes, I know that saying it sounds absolutely stupid, but this is Macross. And man, the scene is very well crafted to the point of being thrilling. And if you think about it, the seeds for this act were planted way back, as we've already saw that singing does indeed do something to Proto-Devlins. We saw it with Gigil and also with Sivil. So in a very no-nonsense, in-your-face conclusion, singing to end the war is also a very logical conclusion. Vasara was right, violence is never the answer. Singing is, at least in the Macross universe. And even in our universe, culture should always triumph over violence. And with the newly discovered spiritual creation, the remaining Proto-Devlin decide to fly away and move to another universe. And briefly before I end this video, regarding the mechanical design, I didn't like the super robot look of the Sound Force. To be more precise, what bugged me the most were the faces on them. Previous Valkyries had very weird looking faces that were very charming in their own weird way. My favorite being the BF-1J from the original Super Dimension Fortress Macross. My problem with the Sound Force is exactly my same problem with the Transformers. Why give them a mouth if they still need speakers? Even in universe, it's still kind of ridiculous. On the other hand, the BF-22 Sturmvogel from Max and Mireia looks great, and it's probably my favorite of the whole Macross 7. I really like the silhouette of that aircraft and the fact that the Batroid mode was inspired by Centrari Tech. All in all, Macross 7 is conceptually a great series with many awesome moments. It only suffers from two things. It's too long and it starts to take itself seriously only towards the end. Aside from that, if it's good enough for Captain Ozma Lee, it's good enough for me. The end of Macross 7 more or less marked the midway point of the franchise main chronology, since after this work, the next project would be a prequel story to the original Super Dimension Fortress Macross that functions more like a mythical exploration of the Unification Wars in order to plant new story seeds for future sagas. The story that I'm talking about is Macross Zero, which would give a lot of background information to Macross Frontier. And as I said before, all of the events of Macross 7 would remain somewhat untouched until the 2012 movie Macross FB7, a film that acts like a summary episode but within the context of the Frontier main characters. It's a nice attempt in trimming all the fat of Macross 7's story and making people get interested on the OG Firebomber and all of the Proto-Devlin saga. I really hope that you're enjoying my long explorations of the Gundam and Macross universe, but don't worry, I'll definitely expand towards other mecha universes like probably Gurren Lagann, Escaflowne, maybe even Irion, and I already touched upon a little bit of Eva. Also, I'm thinking that after my exploration of Gundam Victory, I'll move on to alternate Universal Centuries continuities, starting with maybe Thunderbolt or Tornado Gundam, and maybe moving to the super weird Reconquista engine. And definitely expect the Macross Zero, Frontier and Delta videos. But for now, as you may or may not know, my name is Absa and we can continue the conversation over at Twitter, where you can follow me at Absalonicus, and on Instagram, where I post pictures of my figures, my cats, and sometimes even myself. I'll be trying to talk more about anime, comics, and maybe even figures, something other than shorts, but maybe, I don't know. But till next time, always remember that in fiction lies power. So let's use it to forge a new type of story, our hero's journey.